Perfect. Yes, good afternoon and welcome to everybody to this event. We're going to take a tour around the world and it's going to be extremely interesting, I promise you that. And so, as you know, we have been hearing about 30 by 30, and today I'm extremely proud to announce that we have 5 conservation trust funds that are going to talk not about getting the funds, but actually how to make that those funds reach the field and have an impact. So we have 5 countries being represented today here at the panel. And so we have here Rosa Lemos from FUNBIO, the Brazilian fund, the Brazilian Conservation Fund. Very happy to have you here. We also have the Bhutan Trust Fund for Environmental Conservation with Karma Sharing, his managing director. We have the Peruvian Environmental Fund, Profonampe, with Anton Willems as CEO. We have the Foundation for the Conservation of Biodiversity, BioFund, here with Isilda Nyamtumbo, she's the European Union Program Coordinator. And we also have Karen McDonald, the CEO of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. Welcome, thank you so much for being here. And since we have 5 presentations, each one of them is going to be 10 minutes. So if you see me just getting really close to you, that means that the 10 minutes are going to be over. So, but just enjoy this 10 minutes of this tour to each one of the countries and the different continents. So we start today with Brazil, with FUNBIO, please. Rosa.
So they sit? Will they sit? No, I mean, will they be able to see?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, probably.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I'm Rosa. I'm going to be talking about 2 large-scale projects in Brazil that contribute to the 30 by 30. So, okay. One is a forest program and another is a ocean program, so from land to sea. Next. Oh, thank you. Perfect. Thank you. The first one it's well known within the environmental funds, is the Amazon Region Protected Area Program that has been around for 22 years. It's a partnership with, you can see a number of donors that have been partners to the program for over 20 years. The program supports 120 protected areas, 6 are strict protection and 60 sustainable use areas. They add up to 62.5 million hectares. That's roughly 2 Germanys. The Germans don't like me to say that very much, but it is. This is the map of protected areas in Brazil in 2002 when the program was signed. The light brown colors are indigenous lands, and the green ones are protected areas. Remember, 2002. This is 2016. And the dark green are the areas supported by ARPA, the 120 areas supported by ARPA. So the program helped to create 27.6 million hectares. If you look at the graph, on the green bars, the light green are the areas supported by the program, created by the program, sorry. And on this side you have million hectares, on that side you have number of protected areas. So ARPA has 120 protected areas that they support, that adds up to 60 million hectares. This is the impact that the program have. I'm sure you know that the great CO2 emission in Brazil comes from burning the forest. That's the #1 emission in Brazil. So as we increased investment in the protected areas, the yellow bar is the number of hectares that have been avoided deforestation, that avoided deforestation. And the line is the amount of the investment. So the more we invest in the consolidation of the protected areas, the more they avoided deforestation. This is comparing the conversion of forest, illegal cutting of forest within the ARPA areas and within other non-ARPA areas. The blue histogram is the blue bar are the ARPA areas, how much they lost in illegal deforestation, and the orange one is the non-ARPA areas, how much they lost within the territory. So the program really has an impact. It's very effective. It has contributed greatly to the consolidation of those 120 protected areas. And it was designed when the program started in 2002, we thought we could have an endowment. But when we started with 12 areas. When you end up with 120, an endowment is not going to do. You need an endowment of billions. So in 2014, we did another exercise that combined, in the dark green is the federal protected area budget. In the lighter green, our state protected area budget. The yellowish green, the third one from the bottom up, are new mechanisms that could be added to the budget for the areas. And then we needed $215 million to take the program all the way to 2039, where all the areas would be consolidated, and then the government budget would maintain them. That's where we are. And there's a commitment from the government that they will increase 3 to 4% every year on their budget. So by 2039, they will have, the budget will be sufficient to maintain the protected areas. This was based on, this was 2014, so this, we had already 10 years of data of how much the areas cost. So there was a model, financial model, that told us how much I needed to get to 2039, and that was the $250 million. That was funded by the original donors mostly. This is funded by GEF, KFW, the Moore Foundation, WWF. Don't want to forget anybody. But this is the result of it. So we keep a track record not only of the effectiveness of the areas, how much they evolved, but also how much is the government increasing their budget. That's a commitment. If they don't commit people for the parks and increasing the budget, the donors may hold the budget, the money. So the government is really complying. If you add the protected areas, in Brazil, indigenous lands have a different category. You saw in the map that the indigenous lands, but if you combine both protected areas and indigenous lands, the Amazon has already 51% of the biome protected within those two categories. That's 220 million hectares. It's quite a chunk. Another project, a long-term project that we also managed. This is not as long as ARPA. ARPA is 22 years old. This is a baby, it's only 10. But it's a marine and coastal protected area funded initially by GEF. So there's a 10-year running of the program. They supported 36 protected areas, involves 12 states. If you remember the Brazilian map, we have 10 kilometers of coastline. Most of the states and most of the population are along the coastline. So there are 12 states that are partner to the program. 4 community associations, 7 research centers, 139 research scholarships, 13 integrated community projects, $150 million raised, and 95 million hectares of protected area. There's also quite an accomplishment. Of those 36 protected areas supported, 29 of them have already increased their effectiveness. You can see the bars are for each block of bars are for a protected area. You can see where it started in the light blue, and in the dark blue is where they are today. And the middle red line is low protection or low consolidation. The red line is the optimum. So there are many of them that have already raised and are going to be closing to reaching the consolidation. There were several sources of funding for this one. It's not a sinking fund like we had with ARPA, a long-term sinking fund. So here we have money from legal obligation. In Brazil, if you have an investment in infrastructure, you have to compensate and support protected areas. So there's a lot of money, especially from oil, that they have to pay compensation. So a lot of money comes from legal obligations, national and international donations. In the case of ARPA, it was 100% international donations. In the case of Jefimar, most of it comes from the Brazilian legal obligation, the private sector. And we also have international cooperation from GF. Yeah. The resource that we have today, it will take the areas for another 8 years, the project money. But we also create an endowment that by the time that the sinking fund ends, the endowment will generate sufficient resources to maintain the 36 protected areas. So it's a different arrangement than ARPA, but the logic is similar. You have investment in the beginning of the consolidation that takes a lot of money to consolidate the area. Once they are consolidated, the cost lowers quite a bit, and then it's maintained, in this case, the trust fund, an endowment that will maintain the areas. The states in pink are the ones that are member of this project, JEFMA. The areas in blue are the coastal protected areas and the marine protected areas off the coast. So this program helped to create 93 million hectares of protected areas. And which, when we started, our coastline had 1.5% protected areas. It hasn't reached the 30% yet, but it's pretty close, 26.4%. Thank you.
Thank you, Fumbio. Wonderful news. And our next speaker is Bhutan. So, Mr. Sharing.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I know it's a long day, so hopefully I can make it a little interesting. So, which do I press? Sorry.
This one and this one. Forward this.
So we'll go from one end of the world to the other, from Brazil to the high mountains of the Himalayas. For some of you who's wondering where I come from, the map on the left, the yellow, small yellow, we are surrounded by China in the north, India in the south. So we are basically a very small country, but with a very, very big conservation mission. I'm always proud to be a conservationist in Bhutan because I believe we bring hope for conservation in the world. Why? Look at the map. We are talking of 30-30, trying to conserve 30%. Bhutan is already conserving more than 52% for nature. Our parks are more than 52%, which is relatively one of the highest in the world. We are a country that has pledged to remain carbon negative. We have 70% forest cover. And our constitution mandates that we will have 60% forest cover for all times to come. So when we have such a big mission, it's the role of the people, the responsibility of the people like us. How do we now walk the talk for our country? So that's where Bhutan Trust Fund, I work for the Bhutan Trust Fund, established in 1991. I was trying to Google and see which organization, which country actually, the Rio Summit was in 1992. We were 91 in March. Jeff was established, I think, sometimes in October in 91. What is more important is we are a small country. Our economic needs are far more important than trying to protect the tree. But yet, Bhutan felt that the future is about nature conservation. Conservation is our economic tool. So our king established this trust fund, supposedly the world's first trust fund. Because we have a lot of nature, it is important that we secure adequate financial resources to protect our natural resources. So that gave the birth of the Bhutan Trust Fund. So how did it all begin in 1991? We wanted to start an endowment with $20 million. We were able to get it in fairly quick time. Thank you to Jeff for making it happen. They gave us $10 million. And then we had the other countries. If you're a nationality of any of these countries, please, I would like to extend really our greatest appreciation. The government of Denmark, the government of Finland, Switzerland, Norway, Jeff, Netherlands, and WWF. We secured our 20 million. In fact, we got 21 million. And today, as of September 2024, we have our portfolio stands at $82 million. 71 invested in the US and 11 million within the country. 82 million for you all, maybe Brazil or the big countries, it may mean nothing. For Bhutan, it's a lot of money. So what do we do actually? How do we try to spend this money? And yeah, while we have $82 million, the greatest thing about the trust fund is we are spending, but we are growing. So I cannot think of anything, any better financial mechanism than this. Annually, ever since we are established, we have been spending close to $2 million annually funding local communities as grants, small CSOs, small organizations. And over the years, we have spent over close to $35 million. Yet we sit at $82 million, and we comfortably still continue to give $2 million. So what are the focus areas? Preserving of biological diversity, mitigation on climate change, human-wildlife coexistence, and addressing adverse impact of development to the environment. So basically, these are the focus areas. And what are funding windows? We have small grants that we give annually. We have large grants, which I just talked about, close to $2 million that we give annually. And then recently, we have started the program-related investments. We get applicants like from solar energy. They want to apply for funding from us, but they are a revenue generation. They can sell the solar energy. So what we have is this program-related investments help us to further finance our long-term sustainability. It's like we lend out, it's like a bank, but like as I say in our office, we're a bank, but we are not a bank. Banks rely on interest. Our interest is not about the monetary interest. Our interest is the impact on the environment. So we basically, if we lend them $1 million, we expect to get that $1 million after 10 years or so. Of course, in terms of value, we are losing. But what happens is we are benefiting out of the environmental impact. So we have that funding window. And then recently, we also have sinking fund. We are the only local accredited entity within the country that can access funding from Adaptation Fund and Green Climate Fund. We have secured 2 projects from them. So these are further financial resources that is pumped into our country. So understanding this whole mechanism, you can understand some of our success stories. We have helped with the establishment of the protected areas in Bhutan, which is over 52% of the country. Capacity building, rangers, researchers who are able to build up the capacity to support the cultural and natural heritage of Bhutan. research and environmental education, supporting schools, and eventually, of course, overall biodiversity conservation. So basically, some of you all may think, okay, Bhutan, you're doing quite well. Why are you coming here to COP? You should be happy just conducting your business. But we must remember, conservation knows no boundaries. There is no planet B. We live in the same planet. If we can absorb more carbon in the country, it helps the world. So we have a share of challenges in this world. And what we believe is partnership is critical. No country can do conservation in isolation. The world has been devastated to such an extent that now we have to work in harmony. We have to recognize each other's partnerships. So that's why for Bhutan Trust Fund, although we seem to be doing fairly well within our small country, we believe we are part of this global community and we must work together. We want to tell you all our good stories so that it can inspire you all. At the same time, we have our challenges. Our endowment is sitting at 82 million. If some countries feel that, wow, this is a great country I want to invest in, why not? Help us raise our endowment. We can do more work in the country. So without, as I said, it's a long day. I don't want to bore you with too many sort of slides. This is my last slide, basically saying that it is so important for us to work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schering. That was very inspiring. And our next speaker is Anton Willems from Profonampe, coming here, Peru.
Good afternoon. You're putting the slides. Well, if I jump to Spanish, it's because I am native in Spanish, so sorry for that. But Profonampe is an environmental trust fund, as most of the, as REDLAC, all the members of REDLAC and the other regions. But what is our vision in Profonampe? We want to become the main ally to implement the environmental agenda. So I will do a description more about how we work, because the numbers in Peru are quite different. No? Currently, we have 17%, almost 18% of our land in protected areas. And in the marine and coastal areas, it's like 7.5%. So we are quite far from the target, but we are doing a lot. So why do you need an environmental trust fund in a country? In the case in Peru, why do you need an environmental trust fund? We were created in 1992, so we are part of the first batch of environmental funds. But the idea is how we can consolidate the agenda from conservation and adaptation and mitigation of climate change to a sustainable development agenda. How we can work together at creating opportunities for the people, but at the same time protecting our environment and making sure that next generations will benefit from a sound nature. So we have gone through different accreditations that help us to generate trust from the different partners, and currently we are part of the CTFs accredited by the GCF and Adaptation Fund, and we are also a founding member of Profonampe, and the way we work is making alliances and partnerships that create synergies. So always 1 + 1 is more than 2. And the idea is that in these partnerships, all the stakeholders can be part of it. Not only those thinking about conservation, but also the other part of the stakeholders that need to be involved. So we have a business model. It's weird that the CTF presents a business model, but in the way we work, we deliver different types of services when we try to be a partner to implement the environmental agenda. So in this business model, we work in the execution of projects. We also work on the management of investment portfolios, and we also are working on the payment for ecosystem services. So why do I present a business model? Because when you are discussing about 30 by 30, a lot of stakeholders, the question is not about money, they say. The question is how you can mobilize the money to the different activities that are required to have a 30 by 30. So providing a different set of instruments and a different sets of services allows a CTF to be a partner for different type of stakeholders. Those that want to give a grant, those that want to invest, those that want to create certain economic or financial mechanism. So we can play different roles, and we have the structure and the capacities to fulfill those requirements. And these are a little bit the numbers of Profonampe. We work in the whole country, and we work in different roles. We work as an implementing agency, so we finance the civil society and community-based organizations, but at the same time, we also directly execute the projects. And that has allowed us, in the last 30 years, mobilize more than $390 million directly. If you take into account that a lot of that is money from the GEF, then the GEF requires a 7-to-1 leverage of the funds. So the impact of mobilizing these resources is at least 7 times more if you can separate or segregate the GEF funding and others. At the same time, we also manage investment portfolios, and over the last years, we have grown a lot. And our interventions are mainly in the protection of protected areas. But as an environmental fund, we also work in those landscapes that connect to the protected areas and that also need some different types of protection or conservation, and also on other activities. So in ecosystem services, we work on adaptation, mitigation, and other things. And the last 3 slides is to show that we can work with different agencies. So you can have different roles, but also you can work with different agencies, and a lot of organizations like us will recognize that as a strength. Again, if there is sense of urgency to mobilize resources, then you need trusted partners. We work with institutional partners, we work with philanthropists, bilateral, multilateral, private companies, governments, and we also work with different institutions, with the government, civil society, private company. So if you look back the 30 years of Profonampe, probably one of the things that you haven't seen in my presentation, and you saw it in the presentation of Rosa and my colleague from Bhutan, are those numbers from the protected areas and the results. And actually, I expressly didn't want to present it because the evolution of the protected area system in Peru is completely intertwined with the activities that Profonampe did. We are not the responsible of the protected areas, but most of the things that the protected areas have performed were tried, were modeled through Profonampe. So the results in Peru are also our results as a partner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The impressive results by Profonampe. And our next speaker is Isilda from Biofund. Thank you. Here comes Mozambique.
Thank you very much. I'm going to also continue the presentation on how we reach 30 by 30 and sharing experience from Mozambique in terms of challenges and opportunities. For those who do not know Biofund, we are an independent institution, Mozambican, with the mission of doing sustainable financing of biodiversity conservation for both inside and outside protected areas. We have a strategy running to 2027, and mainly we aim to mobilize the funds and also deploy those funds for all the protected areas, as well as working on environmental awareness and education, plus looking at how we strengthen our efficiency and sustainability as institution. So this is how the financing structure of a BioFund looks like. We have an endowment fund of 61 million US dollars, and those are the donors in the left. And we have also funds through bilateral agreements reaching to 150 million. And these funds come from different institutions that you can also see there. And on the left, we have a map of the network of protected areas in Mozambique. And on the right, the map where BioFund is providing financing through direct investment of the resources from the endowment as well as from the bilateral. We deploy every year an average of 20 million US dollars, both for marine and terrestrial protected areas. I would like, I've been hearing, and I saw also Rosa mentioning that, 30 by 30 is not just about the surface. We can reach, 30%, but the issue of effectiveness in management is critical. And BioFund has been working with the National Agency for Conservation Areas to assess the effectiveness using the tool which is MET. And what we are showing there, similarly to the graph that Rosa showed over the years, you can see how these protected areas are evolving in terms of management. You can also see that there are some areas which are still where the arrow is. For example, it's one of the largest environmental protected area with over 1 million hectares, and it's just starting in terms of establishing the structure for management. So we have a long way to go there. And the challenges that affect the management effectiveness start from the basic issues of having the staff, both for technical management of the resources, law enforcement officers. When we talk about 200,000 hectares or 1 million hectares, you need and a lot of people, you need technology, you need the means in order to enforce the law, as well as, of course, engaging the communities. As I usually say, the boots will not protect effectively the area. You need the will of the people and their engagement in order to control the practices that are being undertaken in these areas and also monitor the impact. We also need to, and we have been supporting research work, and we need to do more to bring evidence on how effective the allocation of the resources is being. And in that component of capacity, I also wanted to bring, we often talk about the money, but the people and the capacity is critical in Mozambique. And the BioFund, like Peru has just mentioned, you have money that is deployed through NGOs, national and international, but we also have programs that we implement directly. And the program on youth leadership in conservation is the one that the BioFund is directly involved. And this provides internship in protected areas to enhance the capacity. And as the graph shows, we have, of course, 6 months that can be renewable, and some of these young professionals do stay employed to strengthen the capacity of the protected area. And I think this is important to be scaled up in order to improve those numbers of effectiveness, and the resources are essential for that. Besides the internship, we will also give scholarship. Education is critical. And in the protected areas where we work, access to education is still limited, and particularly to get girls having education and working in conservation and other areas which are important. So we support that, and I wanted to share as an important part that we should consider in looking at what 30 by 30 means from the area to effectiveness. And I also wanted to indicate that for us moving in particular in the MPAs from 4.6% currently to 12%, which is our commitment for 2030. We cannot promise more than we can do in terms of financing the creation of protected areas. So 12% is our aim. And the conservation community areas is one of the low-hanging fruits, if I may call that way, to have that commitment achieved through the involvement of the community. And also to look at other effectively managed conservation areas where communities do establish through their traditional knowledge, traditional ownership of the resources, and also they establish sacred areas, etc., to use those as and strengthen that local level-led conservation in order to contribute to the 20 by 30. And this is an example of a big project that we just have approved. Is financed by the Millennium Challenge account of 50 million, and it will contribute to the establishment of some marine protected areas, helping us to reach that 12% goal. But also it will strengthen the community livelihoods, strengthen the capacity for monitoring. We have the red points are all mining activities which create pressure on the various resources, including in and around protected areas. And that's an important aspect to look at. How can we achieve the effective management of those areas, considering the threat that is posed by economic activities, which are important for employment, for income, etc. But how do we balance those needs is critical. And I think that's all I wanted to share with you. And this is a picture of some of the young professionals in green and black T-shirts, for example, who are working in several protected areas in Mozambique. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Isilda. And our last speaker is Karen McDonald from the Caribbean.
Thank you very much. Let's see. All right. Thank you again for inviting me to join the presentation. So the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, I'm going to compare. And I didn't do that, so let's go back one. First, of course, explain where we work in the region across a number of small island developing states, and in particular to add that in our case, some of the small island developing states are on the coast of Latin America. So the CBF is set up as a regional environmental fund. Our aim is to ensure that there is sustainable financing, this thing that we've been talking about, available across the Caribbean region. And as you can see, we work in a number of countries across the region. There are a number of donors that have been supporting us in very much similar situations to what you have heard from the other presenters. In terms of the range of possibilities of mechanisms, we have an endowment fund, which is here at 100 million, that holds the fund for 12 countries in the Caribbean so far. And of course, as you've heard from others, also looking to grow it, and we make regular payments to national level conservation trust funds to do the work that they need to do on the ground across the region. We then also have 2 sinking funds which are funded by the German government and which are focused on ecosystem-based adaptation and circular economy work across the Caribbean. We also have since then been working with what I would say are the more traditional projects with end dates, the ones we don't really like. But they're very useful for getting things started and for helping to develop the conservation trust funds in terms of capacity development. So we use the practice standards that we've been working with, and we create opportunities for the national conservation trust funds. So this is a network of the operations that we work in. But as you've heard over and over again from the presenters, that's just the start. As we worked across the region, the idea, it does its own thing. The idea of partnerships is very important, and more so in the Caribbean region. Each of the countries we're working in has their own government. It then also has their own civil society sector. We also have regionally other civil society sector players. And so CBF has been really trying to figure out the best way that we play a useful role in conservation target management and conservation target monitoring for the Caribbean region. So we have a range of conservation implementers that we're working with across the region, some of whom we have memoranda of understanding with, and then of course the other regional funders, so that we really think about at the whole, across the board, the idea of how we work together to make sure there's movement in the Caribbean. The next few slides are from actually from the Nature Conservancy. So first, the story. The CCI is a Caribbean Challenge Initiative. In 2008, as it says, some governments from the Caribbean went to the COP and made a declaration that by 2020, we would have 20% of marine protected areas. And they made sure to add to that the idea that this could only be done if we got funding from those who were there at the COP at the time. That actually is the beginnings and the genesis of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. We have grown and evolved from there, but really the idea of meeting a regional challenge or meeting any of these targets has already been thought about by us in some ways. So for the 2020 challenge, the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, the idea was that it was simplest to do this nation by nation. Each nation should then do their own 20%. It's a good theory, not necessarily the most useful. And so what we have is we did track it. 2008, we had some progress. We did have more progress in 2014. And again, to recognize TNC for the slides. And by the time we ended and the pandemic passed and everything was done, we did have some countries, 5 of the 11 countries had met the 20%. Others had commitments toward it. But the bigger lesson learned is that it didn't make sense to do it country by country, that were other countries that were doing really well, and we needed to figure out how we did a regional approach to looking at 2030. And so that's the direction we are trying to move in going forward. Working again with a range of partners, both on the data side of things, which you can also imagine is lots of fun in a small island set of states with different data and different donors, but to figure out what makes sense for us to reach that 30 by 30 goal. So this is where we are now, and we are working with all the partners across the region to figure out how we monitor and see if we're making progress towards the 30 by 30 goal. And as I've explained, the idea is really how do we do the regional scale planning and the national scale planning, and the role that we can play having the National Conservation Trust Funds already on the ground in a number of countries in the Caribbean to do the smallest scale. This is Grenada, this is St. Kitts and Nevis, and this is Jamaica. They have to do their own first step as to what protected area management means. And then how do we do it at the regional level together to make sure that that 30 by 30 goal makes sense for the Caribbean region. So that is the big challenge that we have, but we are up to it. As you can see, we are very much trying to figure that out and working together. We had, we're coming straight from a session where we had 5 ministers of the Caribbean ministers of environment from the Caribbean speak on the value of 30 by 30 and their commitment to the role of 30 by 30. And you can see what we have as results and thoughts as to the way forward for the 30 by 30 goals. So we're, I think, in the middle of the progress, but we are definitely part of the work that's going on for 30 by 30, and we look forward to learning from the other trust funds and from the other partners as to what's possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, everybody. This has been an interesting journey through the world, and amazing, like the similarities, you know, just all these partnerships that have to unite donors with communities, and yet, like also the evaluation that we saw in Brazil, that we saw, you know, also in Mozambique for how we are reaching to the Met goals, and it's just fantastic. So thank you so much. We still have a few minutes, so we'll take a couple of questions, and if you can just state your name when you know, make the question, that would be great, and if you can indicate which country or which fund would you like to get the answer from. Thank you. Anybody? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the presentations. My name is Jaime Cavelier. I work for the International Conservation Caucus Foundation. And I would like to ask you if you could give us some lessons as of what not to do when setting up or running a trust fund for conservation. Some lessons from your own experience of what not to do or to do differently. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. I picked the microphone, but I think all of us can answer certain things. What not to do is avoid politics. Yeah, because the solution of the problems require a lot of stakeholders. And if you, as an institution, don't internalize that to resolve the problems, you will need to commit in Spanish, la voluntad, I don't know the word in English, no? The desire, the will, no? If you can't do that, it will not happen. So CTFs, and I will take at least for Profonampe, is not an NGO. CTF is a financial mechanism to mobilize resources to try to solve the crisis, environmental crisis, biodiversity crisis that we have.
Lessons learned, strong governance. I think that's what really makes things work well. If you have a strong governance that can make the decisions at the right time, but at the same time being flexible to change as the situation changes, especially if you're thinking of long term.
So from my side, basically from my own personal experience, as a conservation organization, what not to do is don't think that you are the only organization in your country that can solve all your nation's conservation problems. So what you need to do is engage with there are lots of conservation organizations within the government, CSOs, NGOs. It is very important to at least have a meeting once every 6 months or a year, consolidate, see what are the problems in the country, how we can collectively solve it. So what not to do, don't work alone in isolation, basically.
So maybe just to add, and for CBF, we also, of course, then set ourselves up and then set up the 12 conservation trust funds in each country. I think the biggest one is, in addition to all that was mentioned, is don't rush it. Don't do it just to get the deadline reached. Take the time to make sure that all that was said before is properly done so that you have the structure in place.
Also, I would like to add that not to assume that organizations, even international organizations, they have good management structures. for finance. And in the case of biofunds, we run annually training to make sure that the institutions that are recipient to our funds are up to the management and the accountability that we are expected to make to our donors and also to ourselves to show that we are using the resources effectively. So don't assume that everyone knows how to do this.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm Ludwig Jagr from Rio Impact. We're currently supporting the establishment of the CTF in Sao Tome and Principe. I just wanted to raise the point of how could your funds get more resources to local stakeholders? Because I keep meeting local NGOs, local project developers, including from some of your countries, but they struggle to access funding. So natural thinking would be that your funds would be a key solution. So I'm wondering how you could play even a bigger role to put that or to channel those resources to where it's most needed to local stakeholders.
I was volunteered to start. I think the answers in the Caribbean region, and certainly is we continue to learn. It's a totally new concept for us in the Caribbean region, the conservation trust funds, so it's continuing to develop. A big boost is the discussions we've been having with Jeff and the role that CTFs play in co-managing national development goals. So it's not that it's a government-only role. Governments need to work with us side by side. You've heard it a lot more in the OLA funds, the role of governments, but also government trusting us to get the work done on the ground.
Well, in the case of Brazil, when we're talking about protected areas management, the money, FUNBIO implements the protected areas with the government. We buy and deliver things that the government needs. However, 50% of our disbursement every year goes to local communities and other NGOs associations. We have over 250 partners presently that we transfer resources to for direct execution by them.
In the case of Mozambique, we have agreements with the government, for example, to deploy the endowments. And when by government, I mean the authorities managing each of the protected areas that is recipient of those resources. But we also have another component of community development. And for this, we have agreements with the NGOs, including local NGOs. We have also the community-based organizations which lead the decision-making in what options in terms of livelihoods and management practices, and also participate in monitoring the implementation of the activities on the ground. So, but there is a big challenge. We cannot stress this enough in terms of really having organizations which are based locally, who have the capacity to produce projects in terms of the interventions ideas and also budgeting, and then implement those, because there are requirements that are put in place that need to be achieved. And I think this is challenging the CTFs also to maybe put resources in creating that capacity at the local level. Yeah.
Maybe a small word, CTFs can play different roles. Yeah? And to achieve the common goals, you need that different partners do different jobs. So what we can provide, and actually we do it in Peru, is we play a role as a mobilizer of the civil society through grants, small grants, and we also work with more. We have a scope that goes beyond the protected areas, so we work with a broad range of civil society. but at the same time, we are also a good partner for the execution of the projects of the government, because the bureaucracy of the government and the avoidance of innovation that they have, they are very averse to risk in the government. The CTFs can play that role to try and test. And then, if the model is good, you can scale it up through public policy. So we play different roles, and that's also a strength for the different stakeholders on the ground to have a good CTF in your country.
So just very quickly, yeah. Basically to rope in the stakeholders like the local communities. For in Bhutan, basically our trust fund, the way I try to approach that is keeping our grant-making procedures as simple as possible. The more complicated you make it, the more you isolate the local communities. Our job is to give them grants, so we keep our procedures as simple as possible.
Thank you so much. This has been very enriching. We have learned a lot from you. We really thank you. And thank you all for being here. And I would like to invite to close this event Dr. Adriana Moreira from the GF, who has been just a leader in this pavilion.
Well, so much. I could not be more grateful for what we witnessed all these days, this last, almost 2 weeks now. And coincidentally, this is the last event we have from the CTFs in the Jeff Pavilion. This pavilion came alive with your presence, okay? The house, this is the first time in the history of the Jeff that we have at the Biodiversity COP a joint pavilion with our partners on the ground. Today, I think in the world, if you don't know, we have 118 conservation trust funds, environmental trust funds across the planet. The Jeff has been contributor directly to the establishment of 60 of these funds in its history. These funds became very important partners to national governments, to local governments. Some of them work in more than one country, like the challenges that Karen was talking to us, MAR Fund and others. Those are very important mechanisms as we look forward to achieve the goals of 30 by 30, as where we are all, this learned today from this day by day working with all this different set of stakeholders and allies at all levels. The funds are the last mile for multilateral mechanisms as the JAF. And I am very pleased that we had this initiative. We started this partnership last year, and we look forward to continue working with you all, our friends, my friends. Today we added more to our list, where Micronesia, Laos, welcome if you are around, to our great, we have like this ever-expanding WhatsApp group. Oh, she's here. Welcome. So this is a partnership in movement, okay? And stay tuned up to hear from us. We're gonna be there. The JEF as the parent fund, let's say like this, and you on each one of your countries, in all parts of this beautiful little blue planet, from Asia Pacific to Africa to Latin America. You are partners, we are in this together. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and we look forward to continue working with you all. Thank you.